quite warm, so I'm not wearing a shirt. School is useless is, in my opinion, such a beautiful statement because everyone will be inclined to agree and disagree at the same time. And you know what? Everyone would be right. Now, of course, some school systems are better than others. There's a certain set of challenges in our modern world that schools, as we understand them, just aren't equipped to deal with. But there are certain individual schools and school districts, and sometimes even only teachers, who do the best they can with the resources at their disposal, and it's very impressive. Fundamentally, the way we do school is we take children and we fill them up with knowledge. Eventually they leave school having memorized a certain standard set of information, and they go out with like a sheet with numbers on it that tells future employers how good they are at every individual section of that standard set of knowledge. Now, of course, the way that this is done sometimes varies vastly. There's always some degree of specialization the higher up you go in terms of your education, but the intended goal is always the same: outputting individuals who fulfill certain standard expectations of having certain kinds of knowledge so that employers know what they're hiring. Basically, you're turning everyone into cornflakes, and some of them have a little extra sugar on them, some of them have like little bits of raspberry, others have little chips of chocolate. But they're all still cornflakes. And let's be honest, the reason you buy the cornflakes with the chocolate on them isn't the cornflakes, it's the bits of chocolate on them. Because if you were in it for the cornflakes, you'd buy straight cornflakes. What I'm saying is everyone learned a whole bunch of things in school that turned out to be utterly useless in their real life. And we just accept this instead of going, hang on a minute, there's a whole lot of time and money that went into educating these kids that has just gone to waste now. Because think about this, every hour that a kid spends in school is an hour that that kid invests in terms of time, and it's an hour that the taxpayer invests in terms of money. And this investment is an investment in the future of every individual kid going to school. Why then do we accept that education is so utterly inefficient at turning every individual pupil into the best and most well-equipped for life person that they can be? Because it turns out, and this is true, people are very different, careers are even differenter, and then also life paths are even more differenter. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think that there is a certain core curriculum of things that everyone should learn in order to be able to make sense of the world, but it's kind of odd to me that even that we teach primarily as memorizing a certain set of information instead of just teaching children and teenagers the tools so they can make sense of the world. Philosophy should be a core subject taught to kids of all ages from first grade through to the whatever last grade it is that they ultimately attend. I firmly believe this, and it shouldn't be focused, as philosophy class usually is, on which guy with a beard thought what exactly. There's a phenomenon, and I feel like it's gotten a lot worse as I have gotten older, is that people really want to know what the right things to believe are. They're not interested in thinking about or discussing ideas, they just want to know what the correct ones are that they should believe. And me, being ever the idealistic humanist, I'm not of the opinion that this is simply because of tribalism. I think that this is because they are scared. The only method that they know of separating good ideas from bad ideas is to ask the people around them, or the people that they consider authorities on something. They were never given proper instruction as to how to use some of the higher functions of this big old thinking machine up here. They were never taught critical thought, the ways of science and empiricism, fallacies and bias, the foundational knowledge that one needs to learn in order to understand how to think. What's worse, there's some people who eventually acquire an incomplete manual and have a hold of some of these tools, and then they become anti-vaxxers because they don't understand why empiricism is different from just a different set of beliefs. In the 21st century, where most of the information of the world is always at your fingertips, The skills of being able to actually do research and separate truth from bullshit are much more important than memorizing facts that will be outdated in 10 years anyway. This style of education, where it teaches what to think over how to think, is, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems in the Western world today. Another thing that philosophy can teach, if we're using a somewhat fast and loose definition of the word, which, let's be honest, school subjects tend to do that, is emotional maturity. It's a subject matter that schools generally don't teach at all because the expectation is that the parents will take care of it, and some do a great job. But really, how many adults, parents even, do you know that don't have anything even remotely approaching emotional maturity? Yeah, that's a scary high number. And you expect these people to teach their children something that they themselves barely have any grasp of? I had to learn all of my emotional maturity in my early 20s and am still in the process of acquiring some very essential coping skills. That's because whatever you might call my familial situation growing up didn't provide this kind of training. It's yet another essential life skill that schools should teach, but don't. Who here learned how to do taxes in school? It's literally a skill that everyone in life requires at some point. Like, there is no human being who will never have to deal with taxes. And while some classes will teach you how taxes work on the level of government, how to actually sit down and fill out this immensely complicated form, they just throw you into cold water with that. School should teach you basic life skills like that. Now, what you call a life skill is, of course, very dependent on the person that you talk to. I personally would say you should definitely learn the basics of cooking, cleaning, and devising systems of organization that make sense to you in school. You should also learn how the political system works in your country from your perspective, not from the top-down perspective of government, but from that of a voter, what recourses you have, and what kinds of things you can do to influence government. Bureaucracy, too, is something that needs to be understood. A lot of people are terrified of paperwork simply because they've never been taught of what to do with this incredibly complex thing that is very counterintuitive most of the time, and where one small misstep can be very costly. Most of us just kind of acquire knowledge of these things by osmosis, and that is almost always incomplete. Some school subjects teach parts of this, but it really doesn't receive the attention that it deserves. These things are essential. They're way too important for us to just trust that parents will know and then teach them to their kids. Now, of course, even with a smaller core curriculum, there will be some inefficiency. There will be some skills taught to you that you are never going to use. But this is about finding a proper balance. Nobody is actually expecting to develop a perfect system. But the real meat of where we can make school more efficient in teaching the right people the right skills is specialization. Now, every school system has some level of specialization. Usually, the higher up you go in education, the more specialized you become. For me, it was, I think, one elective in middle school, doing expanded or basic courses for maths and English. Then in high school, I could check the box on, hey, do I do Latin or Spanish as my second foreign language? Also, in most of Germany, you pick two classes that become sort of your focus classes that are taught at what we were told was university level. It wasn't university level. It was just, you know, it was a lot more advanced than the basic, but it wasn't university level. Personally, I picked English and biology, although before that, biology was social science, but let's say teacher-related reasons made me pick another subject matter. Now, in order for these advanced courses to take place, a certain number of students would have to pick them in any given school. So if not enough students in your school were interested in the class that you wanted to maybe use as the basis for the entire rest of your life, it just wouldn't happen. You just have to pick something else for logistical reasons. So my school district did something that was actually quite brilliant, because we had 3 high schools in the area, and so what they did was just pool the students. And so, for instance, my advanced biology course, there was only one advanced biology course in all of the 3 schools. So the students from the other 2 schools would be bused to my school to attend that course. It's a great way to circumvent this logistical problem, but some advanced courses still didn't happen. And I think that we can generalize this to a much grander scale. See, there's a lot of people in school who are just not the base ingredients for cornflakes. And no matter the amount of processing that you put them through, they will never make good cornflakes. And they're not just Captain Crunch or Smacks either. They're steak, carrots, and chocolate cake. There's just so much time and money wasted on these kids, not because they could have never become something great, but because they could have never become cornflakes. We forced them into the mold of being something that they were never meant to be in the first place. We did these people a disservice. They could have achieved so much. This is why it is my contention that basically, from middle school forward, half your curriculum should be electives. And some of these electives should occur independent of grades. So instead of doing 7th grade ecology, you do middle school ecology. And so all of the grades from middle school can pick ecology for 1 year because it's ultimately a 1-year course. Or maybe just a semester course. We can do crazy things with this. This way, students can learn what they find interesting and what they are good at. Because things do interest them and they are good at things. The stereotype of the lazy teenager who just doesn't want to do anything is, of course, to some degree accurate, but I think that most of that is because they're just not given anything that interests them to do. And because they're teenagers, they can't just go out and do the thing that interests them, mostly because they don't even know what the thing that interests them is. It's like we've all forgotten what it's like to be a teenager. They're not adults, and forcing them to act like adults in order to give them their education will result in shit education. At universities, you have these things called lecture series, where each week a different professor will come in and present their particular field. This gives you a very basic understanding of all of the fields and also the opportunity to learn about the field that might end up being your thing. And for some reason, we only do this kind of thing in higher education when we could be making so much more regular school time count as efficient education in things that these people will actually use in their lives. And especially for teenagers, the way that you frame a subject is so important. I have a learning disability that stops me from understanding maths. I can understand mathematical concept, but the universal language that they are taught in and that makes sense to everyone else, as in numbers and formulas, does not make sense to my brain. I had to find out and develop my own approaches in order to be able to understand these things. But if there had been a course that taught mathematics in a way that is different from the standard way of teaching mathematics, I might have actually gotten good at it. I might have learned coding if there had been a video game design course that I could have taken in school, because you can trick teenagers into learning things they don't want to learn by framing them in a subject matter that does interest them. But instead, taxpayer money was wasted on me learning facts about Mark Rothko that I have since forgotten. I'm not saying facts about Mark Rothko are useless knowledge, but they are useless knowledge to me. Someone else might have drawn a great benefit from that would have helped them through their entire life. All of these methods are how universities have operated for a really, really long time, and it usually leads to a massive culture shock when you send students in there and suddenly they're presented with this wealth of options and responsibility, instead of just teaching them this self-reliant educational thinking from the very beginning. Now, of course, we have run into a logistical problem. A lot of you might have even already typed up a comment going, oh, how are you going to find all these teachers to make all these classes happen at every single school? Those are some really niche classes. But we live in the 21st century. This past half year, school hasn't happened even within a school area. It happened over video chat. And you could easily translate this into a school setting where some of the information taught there might actually be retained. You could just have a certain set of classrooms or even just desks that pupils will sit down at, and they will use them to attend remote classes taught by other teachers at other schools. So you might have one middle school class about history with focus on the migration period. There's only like 2 or 3 of them in the country, but all of the students that are interested in this can actually attend. It's sniper rifle education instead of shotgun education. Now, of course, this won't solve all of the problems with the various school systems that we have, most of which, let's face it, are political. And it also isn't going to be operating at maximum efficiency all of the time. But at least it's gonna be a lot more effective than the bullshit approach that we're using today. And I feel like getting more bang for your buck when investing in the literal future of everyone, kind of worth it. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection. And in that spirit, consider what life skills you think you would have wanted to learn back in high school that would have come a lot more useful today. And see you around, cunts.